If you were to ask me for my favourite gaming series, I would probably go with Metroid. The tight gameplay, attractive graphics, and otherworldly music alone could put it pretty high on my list. However, what really solidifies its status for me, what truly keeps me consistently invested, is its world building. I'm a sucker for exploring colourful sci-fi settings, and I think Metroid strikes a good balance of making this world feel alive without ever seeming like it's taking itself too seriously. And nowhere is this truer than the ever-detailed Prime sub-series. Scanning could easily be my favourite video game mechanic of all time. Just being able to simply look at something and learn about it is a perfect use of the medium of video games for the purpose of storytelling. But the dedication to fleshing out the series' many worlds goes deeper than you might think. Scanning and lore are one thing, but Metroid has also experimented with a variety of fictional writing systems. Take Prime 2 for example. Planet Aether features these cube-like shapes created by the Luminoth race, which Samus uses collected translation files to apparently read. Well, each of those cubes contains a word written in a super elaborate writing system based on the shape of the Luminoth's fingers, as designed by developer Carl Deckard. That said, throughout the series there have also been runes that don't have such a meaning, such as these square markings found in games like Prime 2 and also Zero Mission. But even they later got a cipher for the Latin alphabet and began to have meaning in 2010's Metroid Other M. And with this in mind, in mid-2021, it didn't take long for fans to notice similar symbols appearing in the upcoming game Metroid Dread. An effort to decipher these runes was spearheaded by popular community figure and speedrunner Torvus Bolt, who managed to come up with a mostly complete cipher and transcribe a handful of Chozo words months ahead of Dread's release. As a good friend of his, I was asked fairly early on to join in on the project back when it was still just a group chat. Now, after Dread's release, the Chozo Deciphering project would go on to attract hundreds of interested people, either observing the progress being made or trying to help out where they could. But those earlier days of the project really got me paying more attention to other game series that have attempted fictional writing systems. It's always impressed me that the likes of Pikmin and Xenoblade have given it a go, series which, while hardly considered niche now, should be commended for the effort of doing so at a time when so few people would likely notice it. Of course, not every fictional writing system is, well, a system. The Zelda series has had a wide range of highly end scripts, some for Japanese and some for the Latin alphabet, but the first fictional writing seen in the series, back in A Link to the Past, is complete gibberish and can't be read at all. It's just there for simple decoration. Now that still goes a long way to flesh out worlds, but now that my mind had wandered into this subject, I found myself paying closer attention to some runes seen in another favourite game of mine, Little King's Story. This game has a myriad of specific praises that is received over the years, and its carefully crafted and highly detailed world has always been at the top of that list. It's certainly what has kept me coming back again and again even a decade later. But with that said, I wouldn't have been surprised if the game's small status didn't exactly justify giving these markings any sort of meaning or significance. I mean, especially given that they're hardly in the game at all. The only time I ever recalled any fictional squiggles off the top of my head was this sign in the entrance to the Ripe Kingdom. But hey, it's September 1st and the Chozo Cipher project had prompted me to give it a second look anyway, and that's when I noticed something. The concept art for this sign found on the Japanese Little King Story website doesn't completely match up with the in-game model. The top line is completely different, but the bottom line is exactly the same, which would suggest that there could potentially be some meaning behind the writing here. So I dived into the official Japanese guidebook for Little King's Story to see if it had pictures of this gate in any form. While I was looking through the concept art section, while there wasn't anything for the gate, I came across something I could not have expected. A piece of concept art for the gravestones in the game, containing 5 characters in this same made-up writing, and, more importantly beneath it, a transcription of how each of them corresponded with Japanese hiragana. And these 5 letters not only revealed that this writing system meant something, but so much more. In fact, it was enough information for me and a group of other fans to decode a whole fictional alphabet in just 3 days. To understand why this Rosetta gravestone matters so much, let's quickly go over the basics of the Japanese writing system. Famously, the Japanese language is transcribed using 3 alphabets. The first is kanji, which are pictographs that represent major concepts, and are often used in nouns and verbs, but don't contain any information on their pronunciation. Oh, and there's about 2,000 of them. They're as complicated as they sound, and by far the biggest hurdle for most Japanese learners. The other two are hiragana and katakana, which are entirely phonetic and mirror each other. Japanese phonology doesn't allow two consonant sounds next to each other, or for words to end in a consonant sound, giving the language a strictly consonant-vowel structure. Therefore, each character in these two alphabets represents a syllable formed of a consonant sound and a vowel sound. The only exceptions are the 5 vowels on their own, and N on its own, which breaks the consonant rule. Both the hiragana and katakana alphabets represent the same sounds and therefore have the same number of characters, but where they differ is their function. Hiragana is used for native Japanese words that lack kanji, forming the rest of the words alongside a kanji, and other grammatical purposes, while katakana is strictly used for words borrowed from other languages, or completely new fictitious words. So what does this all mean for the rune scene in Little King's story? Well, I asked some Japanese-speaking friends of mine what they could make of these 5 characters, and here's what they told me. The hiragana in the book reads Yasuraka ni, which is a phonetic way of writing out the first part of the Japanese phrase for rest in peace. Given the context of the gravestones, right off the bat this confirms that the writing is hiding real Japanese, and that this meaning is relevant to the context in which it appears. And furthermore, that phrase isn't entirely written in hiragana in Japanese writing. It actually should start with a kanji symbol for the first 2 characters. This means that those pictographic symbols are written out by how they sound instead of being given out their own character. And from this we can confirm exactly how this made-up writing system works. Little King Story's runes form a single kana alphabet like hiragana or katakana, except it's used to transcribe every aspect of the Japanese language, which, fun fact, is exactly how the Hylian language worked in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Okay, I admit editing this back that was quite a lot of grammar, but luckily that section's over now and you've made it this far, so why not subscribe while you're here? It helps the channel to trick people into thinking it has more worth than it does, so it means a lot to me. Okay, thank you. Now let's get back to the video. So, with this information in tow, I shared the findings with the Little King Story community and coined a nickname to easily distinguish it, Alpokian, after the main kingdom in this game's world, Alpoko. However, I delivered this discovery with the caveat that we only had 5 symbols confirmed, which, if this really was a complete kana alphabet, would mean that there's at least another 60 or so that we don't know. But that wasn't going to stop me, so I created a Discord server open to anyone who wanted to get involved in a little cryptology, and we got to work. And a few notable individuals really got their hands stuck in. Shout out to these dudes in particular. I take my share of credit for this, but I really could not have done it without them. So where did we start? To make further progress, we needed some sample of Alpokian writing that directly corresponded with in-game text, or some form of context, so that we knew we were on the right track. Well, my first line of thinking was the textures of the letters that the various bosses send to the protagonist Korobo. See, when Korobo is reading these letters, it says at the bottom what they say, and as memory serves, the texture itself had quite a lot of this Alpokian writing. And my memory was right. Now, obviously this alone wouldn't be helpful without a point of reference, as it's unlikely that their symbols would match up exactly with what the in-game text claims these letters say. However, I had an idea. The last line of each letter should at least be the boss's signature. So we checked quickly, and surely enough, basically every Japanese name for each boss had the same amount of characters as their supposed signature on the letter. My theory looked to be correct. And so this gave us something to work with, something to wriggle our way out of the corner. In fact, some of the characters confirmed by the gravestone appeared in these very signatures. King TV Dinner's Japanese name is TV Lunch, transcribed as TV Ranchi, and hey, the Ra character appeared in the position you'd expect. So if this were the case, then the next character along should be N on its own. And, well, we went and tested this theory. We checked the other bosses' Japanese names and their signatures, and this same character was appearing in the N positions there too. So it seems like, through some simple observation and cross-referencing, we had another rune confirmed. And so, at this stage, the plan was to keep doing this method to trickle the rest down. This was starting to come together nicely. For example, Oni King's name started with the same letter as Omblet's, so that was simple enough to confirm the character for O. Interestingly, we thought it was funny that the Oni King's Alpokian name looked vaguely similar to his English one. A fun coincidence that we observed. We also noticed that a lot of the king's signatures ended with the same characters, starting with this O symbol, so we assumed this to be the Japanese word for king, Osama, which may be able to soft confirm Sa and Ma as well. And this is a fun thing I learned about doing my first bit of cryptology. Sometimes your assumptions can be completely wrong. See, at this point nobody involved was all that knowledgeable of Japanese. So what I was looking at was the Japanese way of saying from, yori, preceded by the honorific o, which shows kingliness. Yeah, Japanese is a weird language. And due to this, you can imagine how relieved we are when an actual Japanese speaker came in and started helping us shortly later. At this point we'd already made another big step. By checking a Let's Play, we gathered that the in-game text had the same amount of characters as the theoretical equivalents on the textures, and therefore some of the characters seemed to line up too. Knowing this, our Japanese speaker was able to boot up the game in Japanese and screenshot the in-game text for every letter reading, thus kicking off the next phase of our plan. For this part I would put together a cipher for the characters we identified thus far, while the others sought after any characters that had a direct match in multiple instances across these letters. And our confirmed character count skyrocketed from 7 or 8 to approaching 40. At this point it was starting to become possible to read parts of these letters in a limited capacity, and even confirmed that some lines were ever so slightly altered between the Alpokian texture and the final Japanese text. With just a few simple realizations, our progress was able to leap forward. And with just one more, it was about to blow wide open. Patterns had started to emerge between the different characters. Despite being the one putting the cipher together, I admit that I wasn't actually the one to notice this. In fact, I had to be convinced of it, but it was clear that some of these runes were following some semblance of structure. And then the more we looked at it, the clearer it became. It explained why the Oni King's name looked so similar between English and Alpokian. It wasn't a coincidence at all. No, these runes were transcribed in Japanese, but for ease of reading, the characters' designs were based on aspects of the Latin alphabet. The way they did it was simple, but smart. Japanese hiragana or katakana characters are, as I said earlier, a representation of a syllable that consists of a consonant and a vowel. So each Alpokian character's design uses an angular base shape that resembles a Latin consonant character, and then is modified with a marker that resembles a Latin vowel character. This not only means that the system is straightforward and allows an ease of reading, but it also meant for us that the process of identifying runes was about to speed up significantly. Now all we had to do was simply find a new character, compare it to other confirmed characters, and identify what the two components of its design were in order to find out where it should go on our cipher. This knowledge meant that you could read the language aloud with relative ease, and this meant that translating it became a cakewalk. In fact, in the files of the game was an unused letter texture that had been speculated for years. And as you may recall from my previous video, once we translated it, this revealed not only more about the unused content in this game, but also expanded the lore further too. Our focus for this cipher had completely shifted from what characters we were looking at and identifying those, to finding which characters were yet to be seen that were missing on our cipher. We'd milked the boss letters dry and we were able to identify every single one there, so it was time to find any other instances of writing used in the game in the hunt of finding these missing characters from our cipher. We brought in extra help from even more of the community to find anything we could. We expected a few extra instances of the writing, but we were fortunate enough to be completely wrong. In fact, we may not have ever noticed it before, but the beautiful expansive world of Little King's story was positively teeming with Alpokian writing. We checked every corner, every sign, every book for anything we could get our hands on. We found even more than we bargained for, including a complete set of numerals scattered between a range of sources, as well as Yuan characters, the Sokuan, and the Chonpu. I even kept missing some confirmed runes from the cipher I was making, because at this pace I simply couldn't keep track of what we had and hadn't seen. We found another character, and then another, and we picked them off. We spent hours looking for just one more, until we decided to call it in. We concluded our search. We had what we could call our final cipher. It was only missing 4 confirmed character shapes, out of over 80. On September 1st, we discovered this game had a coherent fictional writing system, and by September 3rd, we had uncovered 97% of it. So, we made the cipher public for the first time outside of this Discord via the Little King Story community Twitter, and, in a sweet sense of finality, it was retweeted by Onion Games, the studio founded by the director of Little King Story. This experience was not only incredibly fun, but it gave me a whole new way to engage even more with one of my favourite game worlds. Even if it took over 12 years for anyone to notice, I'm happy that the devs showed this level of love for their creation, that they put in this effort in the first place. This really is the game that keeps on surprising me, year after year. Now somebody please do this for Animal Crossing. That right there, I need to know what that says.